We're partnering with NoCD to raise awareness about OCD. OCD is more than what you see on TV and in the movies. Imagine having unwanted thoughts about your relationship stuck in your head all day, no matter how hard you try to make them go away. That's relationship OCD. It comes with unrelenting, intrusive images, thoughts, and urges about your partner or loved one. Breaking the OCD cycle takes effective treatment. Go to NoCD.com to get evidence-based treatment.
All right. Well, so today I'm talking with Hannah, and she's one of our locals. She's got a support group in Huntersville, and I'm really excited to be talking with you today, Hannah.
Thank you so much. I'm pumped. I've always wanted to do this, so thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So a little backstory. Hannah and I got connected by email. She emailed me sharing this free OCD support group, and I thought, wow, I really got to know about this group and tell my people about it. So I'm happy to hear what this group looks like, how often you meet, all those details.
Hi, I'm Erin, licensed clinical mental health counselor and OCD specialist. I'm also a Christian, wife, mom to 3, and small business owner, helping those who are overwhelmed by stress to climb out of that valley and enjoy the view. Reheat your coffee and pop in your AirPods to learn how to boss up to OCD.
Yeah, right now, so it is a harm and sexual obsessions or intrusive thoughts. People who are plagued with those themes, they're not the most fun themes to talk about. And my goal, I've been plagued with them my whole life. My goal in starting the support group was to normalize those actions or those thoughts and how they just come about. They're scary. You don't want to tell anybody. You're thinking about it, replay over and over. And I joined a support group when I was in the thick of it. And I remember going into that support group, I was super triggered because they would say crazy stuff, not even crazy, like knife or LGBTQ. It's just whatever your theme is. And I'm like, oh my God, no, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do this. And then I thought about it in an ERP sense. And I was just like, wait, a word's just a word. Like, why does that hold any value over me? Like, why is that like dictating
power?
Yeah. And I was just, the word ice cream doesn't take value away from me or hold power over me. Maybe if I want ice cream, but just little things like that. And so I was just like, well, let's put it into perspective. And then that support group was really, honestly, really funny. It was dealing with such scary, taboo pieces of OCD that no one really wants to deal with. There's a lot of people in there who are very nervous, especially I know with pedophilia OCD. That is such a hard one to deal with. And you can definitely tell, honestly, who's struggling with that one because they're scared to vocalize what they're talking about. And so in that support group, I got to a point where I was like, oh, yeah, I've had that. And they're like, how did you get rid of that? And I'm like, well, you don't get rid of it. You just make peace with it. You ride that way. You ERP it out. And one day it won't have that power. And then it'll probably be a new theme. And then you'll just be like, okay, well, now let's go with that one.
Right. It's very cool. And you've been through this so much so that you can sense what other people are going through. And that's where it sounds like this group, it sounds super beneficial to anybody because you're like, really, this is ERP at its finest in a way.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a full circle moment for myself, somebody who never talked about these intrusive thoughts, to holding a whole group about the scariest ones. And I say the scariest ones, I always think the current theme you're in is the most scary until you're in your next theme. And then that one's the most scary. But so like, that's the mentality I have. And that's what I tell people. Yes, this feels terrifying. And for myself, I'm always like, man, I wish I had this theme back. I want that theme back. And then as soon as it comes back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want it. What happened? I don't want that one anymore. What did I do? And then, and it's whatever the scariest theme that you have is the one you're currently in. And that's what I'm telling you, the support group. So I met with a new OCD therapist when we moved to the Charlotte metro area. And she was talking, I was in an OCD spiral, and at per usual, I was having a kind of like relapse per se due to medical reasons, which we can talk about. But I was partnered with her, worked with her. She was amazing. And she was like, you would be really good at talking about this. Have you ever considered being an advocate for OCD? And I was like, I haven't. I was like, but yeah, it's normal to me to talk about this stuff. And when I go into therapy, I'm like, hey, this is exactly how I feel this is what's happening. I know I should do this. I'm stuck right here. I don't know.
Right. And such a good point, because oftentimes once someone is ready for therapy, they're like, I've already done A to Z and I just need your help getting over that hump. And so part of my work with people is we're going to come out of that valley and enjoy the view.
Yeah. And that's the most beautiful thing when you can get to that space when you're like, this is actually working. This ERP is making me feel better. I'm dealing with scary stuff. And she had me on hierarchy, starting with the smallest thing to the biggest thing. And so support group, one of the things that I value that I have, not value, that I have such a blessing is I do have the flexibility and the money to afford therapy. And I know therapy can be very expensive, especially ERP therapy. And I also know support groups. It's like another step into me in recovery, talking about it with your peers, just having somebody else. Yes, I have OCD. I have scary thoughts. You do too. That's so cool. What do you do? What ERP do you do? I always find it fascinating hearing like ER tips. And so that's why I wanted the support group to be free and reachable to anyone struggling with taboo OCD stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it's newer. I think people with taboo OCD tend to be really hard on themselves. And so I think a little ERP and a little ACT therapy and mix that in together and you're going to start feeling better, hopefully really soon.
Yes. I've taken trainings with a lot of awesome examples of ERP and they're great. We can do live demos in our trainings. And so the participants are like doing all sorts of stuff. I'm like, wow, this is incredible.
It is. And it's so scary when you're in it. You're like, no, I can never do that. Like, I can never accept these thoughts, because if I accept it, then what does that mean about me? And how does that make me feel? And am I that person when I accept it? And you're not accepting that's who you are. You're accepting that you have thoughts, random thoughts all throughout the day. And sometimes you get one that just sticks in your head and you just need to sit there with it and just, I like calling it like ride the wave, just ride that anxiety.
And the point you're making about therapy, I run into that many times, and I'm planning to do an episode in the future about how to afford therapy. So I'm going to have a whole episode dedicated to that, because there are a lot of nuances and just tips and tricks, especially if you're like using insurance or navigating out of network benefits. Like it's a lot.
It is.
Yeah. And it's so much, and it's a legitimate thing. That's why I plan to do a whole episode about payment, because it is such a big deal. So, and I love that you're offering this free support group. So it's like happening every other week at a church, right?
Yes. So I wanted to keep it free. I needed a free to lower end venue. And so I know sometimes I don't want to turn people off thinking, yes, it's at a church, but it's not like a religious affiliated group. The church has amazing housing for us to like be in a private area. No one's around hearing your thoughts, because I know that's like something that goes through my mind all the time. I'm like, people who don't get OCD, what do they think I'm talking about? And I know everybody's thinking that. So it is a like seclusive area. No one's going to hear your thoughts or what we're talking about. But it's also, it's very minimal. I just pay, I think it's $20 every meeting for myself. I ask for no donations. And it's great. It's very helpful, I think, for everyone. Yeah, I'm pumped. Like, I love talking about OCD stuff now. I never thought I could say that, because I've been dealing with it since I was 7. Yeah, it's been a whole full circle moment though. I love it. It's made me who I am, and it's been really cool.
Right. So tell me about the time going back to whenever you first learned about OCD and it sunk in. This is what it is. Like, this is what I'm suffering from.
Yeah. So when I was 7, I was a very kind of anxious child anyways. And when I was 7, I wanted to hang out with my parents, but it was like past bedtime and it was like a school night. And I really wanted to ask them like a question, but they were watching a scary movie. So I like hid behind the wall so they could enjoy their movie. And I was trying to be patient and wait to ask them something when it went to commercial. And I remember so vividly, like it could have been like ER. It could have been like Grey's Anatomy. I don't know what it was. I just remember it was like a lot of blood. And then that stuck in my head, like somebody got killed. And I was like, oh, what if I accidentally killed somebody? And so I stewed on that thought for about 2 days. And I just had a full breakdown with my mom I remember it so vividly. She was doing sit-ups in our dining or in our living room. And I was like, Mom, I have to tell you something. And I'm 7. And she's like, what? And I said, I need you to hide the butter knives. And she's like, butter knives? Like, and in my 7-year-old brain, that's the only knife you're allowed to use, or in our household, that was the only knife I was allowed to use at 7. So I'm like, if I have access to butter knives, what if I sleepwalk and kill my whole family? And I tell her that, full panic moment. She is panicking. She's like, what? And then she didn't know what OCD was. And then my dad comes in the room and he's like, why are you crying? And I told him. And then he is such an even keel person. Like, he was like, oh, it's interesting. Yeah, like that could happen, but that's okay. That's not going to happen. Could, probably not. I don't think he realized he was doing ERP at that moment, like accepting this wild thought.
You're not going to do that.
Yeah, but he was living in that uncertainty before he knew what OCD was, which was cool. And so then I started having really bad panic attacks because these thoughts weren't going away. And I would have them in school. They morphed into like health OCD almost, where I was like, I have a headache. Oh, brain tumor. And then I was just like crying to my parents over and over. Do I have a brain tumor? Do I have a brain tumor? Or if my stomach hurt, I'm like, do I have cancer? Do I have cancer? I would feel like my muscles, and if something felt off, I'm like, oh, something's wrong with my body. And I just asked everyone, let's go to the doctor. Let's go to the doctor. And they were just like, so they took me to a psychiatrist or psychologist. I can't remember. And that's when they found out it was OCD. Now, my parents have been amazing throughout this, but they thought in that time that if we just took anxiety medication, it would go away. And for a while, I don't want to say suppressed the thoughts, but it just leveled my hormones or serotonin out. And
well, it faded probably a little bit with the intensity.
Yeah. And as a kid, I just needed that. And then I think I was dealing with anxiety so much as a kid anyways, that I was just so comfortable at that point. And so then in high school, I had the first, I guess what we call, it's called SO-OCD, so sexual orientation OCD, that all of a sudden hit. I'm 13 years old. I was like sick in bed watching, it was like an Amanda Bynes show, and her dad ended up kissing another man. I had seen everything before. And so, but for whatever reason, in that moment, I was like, what if I did that? What? And then I was like, wait, why am I thinking that? And then it just started going spiral. And so then immediately I have to confess to my mother. I'm like, mother. And so I tell her, what if I'm gay? What if I'm bi? What is this?
Right.
And she goes, yeah. And she's like, oh, who cares? And I was like, but like, I need to know. I need to know right now. Yeah. This feels very scary. And she was just like, it really wouldn't matter. Like, why would it matter? And I was like, no, you don't understand. It does matter. I don't know why, but it does. And so then that played out over time. And then they were just like, this is like a thing. It'll just pass. They didn't register that with OCD because I don't think they were educated fully on how the themes could change.
Right. And kind of to this part about the sexual orientation OCD, that really goes back to the intrusive thoughts. That is the heart of intrusive thoughts. The involuntary thoughts, but the intrusive thought causes this panic and this distress and the
you have to figure it out.
We're partnering with NoCD to raise awareness about OCD. OCD is more than what you see on TV and in the movies. Imagine having unwanted thoughts about your relationship stuck in your head all day, no matter how hard you try to make them go away. That's relationship OCD. It comes with unrelenting, intrusive images, thoughts, and urges about your partner or loved one. If you think you may be struggling with relationship OCD, there's hope. NoCD offers effective, affordable, and convenient OCD therapy. NoCD therapists are trained in exposure response prevention therapy, the gold standard treatment for OCD. With NoCD, you can do virtual, live, face-to-face video sessions with one of their licensed specialty trained therapists. It's affordable and they accept most major insurance plans. Breaking the relationship OCD cycle takes effective treatment. To get started with NoCD, go to nocd.com/savage.
Yes.
And there's no figuring it out. Rationale makes absolutely no sense. Like,
you can never satisfy OCD.
No. And when I learned later in life, when I did figure out a lot of this was OCD, that's actually a more common one when you're going through puberty, because you're figuring out a lot of stuff about you, which I thought was really interesting. I can actually and this is not normal for everyone, but I can like map back certain stuff that have triggered my thoughts, which is really interesting. As working with like my ERP therapist, it's been really neat. But so they would ebb and flow. I remember in high school, I had this one boy I was dating, and I was literally so obsessed with him. He was like love of my life. We were like 15. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, this is it. We're in love. And I remember one day we were smooching on the couch, and I just had this intrusive thought, what if he leaves me? What if does he not love me? Do I not love him? What is happening?
Oh, the relationship OCD.
Yes. And that made me so scared in that moment. As we were kissing, I turned away and just puked everywhere. Literally puked everywhere. As a 15 or 16, I was mortified. I was like, oh my God. And he was very nice. He was like, oh my gosh, are you sick? And I didn't know what was happening in my head at that time. So I was just like, yeah, so sick. Ooh, hope you don't catch this. I knew it was anxiety, but I was like, ooh, don't catch that. And he was really nice about it. But so it all went focused, my intrusive thoughts focused on what I prioritized. So my brain figured out all of this was OCD. In grad school, I was under the gun. I went through a breakup. I was in grad school teaching. I was doing an internship, but also found my first job out of grad school. And there's just so many like stressors going on that I was watching Law and Order, SVU, and the pedophilia OCD kicked in. And I just remember being absolutely so terrified. I was just like, what is happening in my brain? My body got cold and hot. I couldn't sleep. This went on for about 3 weeks. So I was just dealing with this internally. And it was just over and over. Like I couldn't do school. I was like crying to like my dad. I'm like, hey, I just really stressed. I didn't want to tell him I was stressed, but I was just like very, very stressed. And so those are like, to me, one of the more taboo ones, the scariest ones I've ever had. And so I was just like, oh, how will he take this? I am going to need to be locked up in a mental institution. Something is wrong with me. And so I got really bad, I guess more like depression. And where then I almost had suicide ideation at that point. Right. And it wasn't suicide OCD, because I've also experienced that one in my early teens. But it just got very scary, very dark. I wasn't functioning. I wasn't eating. I lost 30 pounds. Crazy.
Yeah. And that happened because so many times people with OCD, they're saying it is so intense that can't do anything, and they've lost all joy, and they can't go out. They've withdrawn. I mean, everything is really heavy and it feels impossible sometimes.
It is so bad. And I'm like a kind of like high achiever perfectionist. So I was struggling. Like, I'm like, I can't get this stuff done that I need to get done because I'm so tied up in my head that I just want to sleep. I was like, because I feel like when I'm sleeping, that's when I get the peace. It quiets because I'm in bed. And so when the suicidal ideation started, I was just like, okay, something is wrong with me. I was like, I have to either go see a therapist, and he'd tell me I'm crazy. I was like, because something's got to give. Something's got to give. And I remember looking at, do people get scary thoughts? I think that's something I typed in on Google. And at that time, it was called intrusivethoughts.org, but it's now made of millions. That came up, and it said, hey, you actually might be struggling with OCD. And I was like, I already have that. I was like, I have that. What do you mean? OCD? Like, what do you mean? Look through there.
Even though you went as a child to get medicine, it was like
that was
kind of okay. They just communicated, take this medicine, we'll be fine. Did they even say OCD at that time?
They did. I think my parents took it as I'm more like a hypochondriac. Like they were like, oh, it's probably like hypochondriac. She gets terrified of stuff, but she just over panics, and then she'll be fine. In a couple of weeks, she'll be fine. And then I remember getting off medicine in middle school. Just because they were like, oh, you seem to be fine. And I think it's more of a generation thing with them. That's just not something they focused on in my parents' generation. And
even parents now, it's hard having that conversation about medicine and just talking about how it can be helpful. And it's always up to you and your doctor. But just maybe go have a conversation with your doctor and see what they say.
Yeah. It was like confusing. And so I went to that therapy. I saw intrusive thoughts. They said it could be OCD. So I started Googling OCD therapists near me. And I said, okay, if this guy says this is an OCD and that I'm just crazy, I had my wing picked out in the mental institution. I was like, this will be my room. We'll decorate it really cute. I was like, this is how it's going to be. And then went into that meeting, and I told him everything, and it took so much courage to tell him exactly what was happening. I'd never done that with anybody.
Yes.
I was just at a breaking
so true.
point. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It is terrifying telling somebody what you're going through. And he just looked at me and was like, oh yeah, no, that's what you're describing is OCD. Like, yeah, you're just in a new theme. And I was like, what? Yeah. It was such a relief. I was happy and sad tears. I'm like, I hate having this, but oh my gosh, this makes so much more sense now. I was like, wow, I can finally like connect in my brain. Okay. But at that point, he wasn't an ERP specialist. He said he specialized in OCD, but he was more CBT.
So not quite what you needed, almost, but not quite.
And I didn't know that at that point. I wasn't so into my OCD knowledge. And he was great for that time, making me understand how OCD worked. He wasn't pushing me. So I got to a point in, I guess, my OCD journey of recovery. He wasn't pushing me. And I don't want to, everyone hates ERP, right? You hate OCD, you hate ERP. One of them's going to make you feel better. You got to choose the one that's been proven to make you feel better.
Yes, right. I know, because you're already uncomfortable by the OCD. Why not try 1 hour ERP per week?
Yeah.
And see what likes you. It's going to be
insane.
Bounds better. You're going to get a lot of time back, a lot of energy back. You're going to get freedom in your mind.
Yes, it was a game changer. And that's when I started, I was like, why do I not feel better? Like, why don't I feel better? And I got on medication. At that point, I was on Lexapro. I did want a quick, but I was like, yes, this is OCD, but I'm still having anxiety. Like, how do I stop this? And since I was still in grad school, I'd actually, I went from undergrad to grad school. So I was still with my PC or pediatrician. I was still with my pediatrician. I had not made a new connection. So I'm like 22 years old, and I'm like, hey, it's me. I was like, I need help. It was actually very concerned. It was just very small. And at that point, I'd gotten down. I was also dealing with the eating disorder at that point too. When I get nervous, I don't eat. So they were like, it's like a constant battle in my head. Like, what is going on in your head? He was very nervous, and he was just like, we need to get you on medication. And I was like, no, sounds good to me. I'll try anything at this point. I will do what you say. And so for me, that worked really well. Got on Lexapro at first. I was on it for 5 years. And then I also was like looking for a new OCD therapist, probably about year 2. That's when I started really diving into what ERP is. And then I joined.
Wow. So even
a long time.
You were 7 years old getting treatment for OCD, and then probably not until your mid-20s are you getting the ERP.
Yeah, because he didn't tell me really much about it. I don't think.
Wow.
I think he knew some of it, but I don't think he knew like enough to be like effective with a hierarchy, if that makes sense. So, and then I'm dealing with transition of life, going from school. I've been in school this whole time to, oh my gosh, we're going into the workforce. So then you add that stress on. But I ended up finding NoCD in that area because there wasn't many OCD therapists there. So I was like, let's try this NoCD. Let's see what that's about. And the therapist that I had in Tennessee when I lived there, she was the best. Like, she was so cool. She goes, oh yeah, but we're going to pretend like you don't have OCD.
We're partnering with NoCD to raise awareness about OCD. OCD is more than what you see on TV and in the movies. Imagine having unwanted thoughts about your relationship stuck in your head all day, no matter how hard you try to make them go away. That's relationship OCD. It comes with unrelenting, intrusive images, thoughts, and urges about your partner or loved one. Breaking the OCD cycle takes effective treatment. Go to NoCD.com to get evidence-based treatment.
Again, my things have changed. The current boyfriend I'm with, we've been best friends since we're 5, and he's been like a rock through all of this. But my OCD latched onto him and saying, does he love me? Do I love him? Right. And I would be sitting on the couch watching TV, like a football game or something, and I would just look at him and go, I love you. And then just wanting him to say it back to me as like a reassurance.
Right.
He was just like, I love you too. That's such a random thing to say in the middle of the football. And it wasn't like out of, I do love him, but it wasn't out of a love. It was more out of compulsion of, I need this reassurance right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So you had a very positive experience with a NoCD therapist.
Thank you so much for listening to part 1 of the interview with Hannah. Come back next week to learn more about her story and her journey with OCD. In wrapping up this month of religious OCD, I wanted to throw out a book recommendation that's called The Doubting Disease, and it was written by, now I may butcher the author's name, but the author is Joseph Ciarrochi, and I'm going to put a link to that book in the show notes. Thank you for listening to another episode of Bossing Up, Overcoming OCD. This information is intended to be helpful and not a substitute for professional counseling. If you're struggling with any mental health challenges, I encourage you to seek help from a qualified therapist or healthcare professional. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners, and don't forget to check out the affiliate links in the show notes for hand-picked recommendations that can brighten your day. Your support through these links helps keep the show running and provide valuable content. You're not alone in your journey. Stay strong, stay resilient, and keep bossing up. See you next time.